So Webflow launched the page building concept a while ago now, and they have these modes now where you have essentially a design mode and you have a build mode. And this is sort of replacing the old school edit mode that we've seen before. It's on the surface, it's a great feature, but it's actually quite tricky to get your head around how to build with it. And this comes with the idea that now we've got variables, we've got variants, and we've even got modes. So there's lots of things going on and lots of things to get your head around. So me personally, I've wanted to roll it out to a lot of my clients, current clients and past clients, because I know that things like this will help them in their day-to-day life of managing their website. But I've not really known where to start. So I build with MAST quite a lot. I find the sort of layout, the rows and columns, I find that really easy to get to get to grips with. It's not so opinionated that if you go off piste, your site falls apart, but it just has enough to make sure that you can get going. And it's relatively traditional in the fact that if you want to do a 3-call, a 2-call, a 4-call, it plays really well for that. So I was super excited when Corey launched MAST 2.0, and MAST 2.0 is not really a huge change in the way MAST deals with classes and layouts and utilities. But what it does do is it takes advantage of the page building build mode, let's call it. Webflow call it build mode. So what I'm going to do here is just dive quickly into what build mode is in the context of MAST. So if you want, there's also some videos on page building on the Webflow University, but it deals a bit more generically with it. But what MAST has done, what Corey with MAST has done, is he's revised MAST, and now it's got version 2.0. If you go to nocodesupply.co/mast.docs, you get a really good video here that he explains. He goes into depth about what he's changed and why he's changed it. But what I've done is I've just cloned a project here. And what I'm going to do is just go through the quick initial impressions of how MAST 2.0 works with build mode. So in essence, it looks all the same. A lot of the classes are the same. He's changed a few of them. For example, like paragraph, it used to be paragraph 1.25. Now it's paragraph large. There's a few elements like that. I'd encourage you to go and watch one of the explainer videos to see what's changed. But in terms of build mode, what we have now is if we go to the page view here, we can see we've got a build mode template. So if I click on here, what Corey's done here with MAST is he's created a load of components. And these components, as you can see, all sort of cover a variety of layouts that you might consider using in your project. You might look at this and go, it's very similar to Reloom. In fact, it is very similar to Reloom in that it's given you a bit of a starter kit to go forward. The big difference is with Reloom, each component, they call them components, but they're not really components, Webflow components, they're sort of layouts. Each one has lots of different classes related to that layout. So this might be section header 1, this might be section header 2, this might be section feature 1, this might be section feature 2. So it does make it really hard to, one, manage the site because you've got lots of classes, redundant classes working when you could use one class. But also just having a design system per se is quite tough to do. With the build mode with MAST, you can notice on the left-hand side here, they're all the same component. So they're all using the same component. Now, what I'm going to do is just going to dive into each one of them. And you can see that actually behind each component, they are very different. So let's go and have a look at this relatively straightforward, as Corey has put it, a simple header. So we're going to go in here and have a look in here, okay? So you can see here that when I go into it, all the content disappears. Why? It's because I've got a slot in here. So what we've got here is a section, and that section, if we have a look, is it's got styles applied. So we've got some padding, we've got positions. That's basically it, and we know that that's the case from using MAST 1.0. Then we have the container inside. Again, the container here is relatively standard. I'll go on to the variants in a minute, but we have a container which has, you know, the spacing. We have a width and max width using a variable now, and then we have a slot. So the slot is essentially now just a place where we can put content that sits within the section and container. So straight away you can see, okay, we've got this little starter pack here of a section, and we can just use that component and just drop things into the slot. Okay, so if we go and have a look what's in the slot, and we can only do that when we're out of the component, is we've now got a grid dash row. So a grid dash row is essentially a row component, and I'm going to go and have a look in here. So it's a div block because you need the component to have its own div before you put a slot in it, and then the slot itself is a div with the class of row on it. I'm going to get rid of this sort of variant here. So you can see, if you're familiar with MAST 1.0, that we've just got a row, and that's got all the styles applied to it. And then in that row, we've now got, and I'll see if I can open this up a little bit so we can see, we've now got a grid column. Okay, I'll go in and have a look again, get rid of the variants for now. It's just a col, and in that col we have the slot. See, the col has the styles applied to it. We have the calc going on with the variables, and we have a slot inside it. So what you can see now straight away is we've got a row with a column inside it. Now it looks a little bit convoluted, but what it does mean is that if, for example, I have a row here and I have a column, I can just copy and paste that column. I get another column inside. Now, this is where it becomes really interesting, especially because this is the kind of bread and butter of how MAST works, is that this column here has a column size, okay? And this is a variant of that column. Okay, so at the moment, it's using 9 out of the 12 columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say use the 6. And on this column here, I'm going to say use 6. Obviously, 6 equals 12, so they're 50%. Now you can see I've just arranged the columns into a 2-col. And this is behaving like it would do in MAST. So what's happening in the background is that essentially we're not using classes here, we're using variants. So I'm just going to go and have a look at this column here. So we can see 6, 12, that's 50%. So what happens here on the variant of this column, 6, 12, this should go to 50% of its parent. Now, if we say go to full, this is just going to fill the space if there's nothing else there. We've got shrink, so it's going to shrink to the contents. You can see here, because a slot thinks it's got no content in it until you get out of the column, you can see it shrinks quite a lot. And then we have all the other variances. So here we go. We've got 4 out of 12, so that's 33%. We've got 5. We've got 3, which is 25%. So you can see how this applies. Instead of applying a col to go col large 5, we've got these variants. Now, there's a little bit of a kicker here, I suppose, is that what if I want this to change on a different breakpoint? So I want it to be 6 out of 12 here, and then on a mobile to be 12 out of 12. Well, the variant doesn't change, but in the styling that have been the sort of defaults, that has gone to max width 100. Okay, so there's a little bit of I wouldn't say hacking around, but it's a little bit of understanding that there is a little bit of straitjacket towards it. So you can't be super flexible, There are ways to get around it. Like, for example, we could say this call here, we're actually going to put a custom attribute of class, and we're going to say call custom class, for example. Okay, and that means that when we are working with the grid column, we can actually add in a custom class here. So we could say call small 6, for example, and that means that when we do get to this point, this overrides the variant here. So that might be 8, for example. So yeah, it's super flexible. That's the main element. But what it does mean is that if we go, say, down to here, look, we've got the same section with a container and a slot. And if I go into that slot, we can say I've got a grid row and another row here. Let's go into this row here. We've got a row, brilliant. And then inside that row, we've got a load of columns. Now, inside that column, we've got a slot. So you see, we've got a slot that allows us to put the rows in. Each row has a slot. Each column has a slot. And then even in this slot now, we've got another row that we can put in elements in here. So you can see how it gets nested and nested and nested. And then what MAST does is it gives you some content components. So if you have a look at this content component, it's essentially just a rich text block. So you can add in whatever you want in here. So we can go edit this rich text. For some reason, I'm not sure if it's just for me, it's delayed a bit, but we could go in and put in a header. Then we could even put in, let's put a block quote in, okay. And we can see that we can just edit that in that content space. Now, the way I do this now is I actually create lots of different content types. So I've got a content paragraph, I've got a content header, I've got images, I've got videos, all as components, which means I can stick these in to these slots and make up a variety of elements within each section. Now, there's other ways you can do it. Say, for example, now you have an article card. Like, you could just create an article card as a component and then a slot in there. And then again, try and, as much as possible, use components to make up that article card, because that means they can be used somewhere else. So, for example, you might have a tag for a card that could be used in an article card, but it could be used in a product card. And then you could add variants on top of that. So if you see, for example, here we've got content, we've got alignment. So these are variants. We've got left align, we've got center align. The column itself, we've got, again, we've got the different variants here. But there's lots of super cool things you can do. The brilliant thing is you can create a system that is relatively safe to use for a client. So when they get into build mode, they can start building their sections, and you know that they're not really playing around with classes. That means they're not breaking a lot of things. Yes, they can add classes in, and in this instance, we could actually use something like Lumos's Chrome extension to make this prop here actually look like classes. It searches all your classes in your platform, in your project, sorry, and allows you to add them into here. So there are lots of things you can do which make this build mode now super powerful. There are nuances, you will get clients going, hey, but can I do this or can I do this? And it might go against the system that you've got. But I guess that's our task as developers and designers is to cater for those requests, because every project's unique. So the bigger thing I found is that once you built on top of this, I've built a little bit of elements on top of MAST 2.0. Like I've put in fluid responsive typography, for example, and spacing, which means that I don't use breakpoints that much. I use clamp to make sure that something that starts off at maybe 6 rem on desktop goes down to 4 rem on mobile, and everything else sort of shrinks accordingly. So things like that you can add in, but it's a brilliant starter kit. And once you get the first couple of pages going, you get components that can be reused again and again and again, you can really get going with creating pages, but just using build mode. And what it does, it means you don't get bogged down in rabbit holes of saying, oh, I'm going to change this style and change this style and change, well, where will it impact stuff? You can be in the mode of building where you're building the pages. And then when you want to change how those elements look or behave, you can go into the designer mode and it will impact all of those components that you use in build mode across all of the pages. Okay, so another really cool thing about MAST while I'm here is the icons. So again, we have a column, a slot with an icon. In this icon itself, we have, and again, it's like the terminology, you have to just have a dive around and play around and see how it works. But there's an icon component. Now, in this icon component are a set of props. You have the class, you have the size and the color, and these are actually attached to other components, but within the icon size. And we're going to look in here, it's like an icon, we have a variant and a class. So if I have a look at the icon and go, okay, do you know what? I've got a variant and I've got a class. So let's go up to the icon parent here, and I can see that I can change the color because I've got a variant on the color. I've got the size, I want to go large, I want to go small, I want to go base. And then also I can change the icon itself because in MAST, we're using a icon font. So if I want to go arrow right, it gives me an arrow right. Arrow left gives me arrow left. Now, obviously, you need to remember what these are, but it's not too difficult to then give a client a sort of a glossary of what these icons are and what they're called. Again, you could, using Timothy Ritz's Lumos extension, you could set up all these classes in the style guide, and then they would be referenced here for the client. So you could give them maybe 12 icons that they could use. And when they start typing in PH dash, it will show all those icons. And the idea is that they can choose from those. So there's lots of really juicy things you can get yourself into here. But on the surface, again, it looks like Reloom, but when you dig down, the flexibility of it is really, really strong. So yeah, I'd encourage you to have a look and have a play. Just clone the project and then just start building pages. The essence of it is you go to build mode and you just say, look, I want to create a new page, and you create that page, and off you go. And just keep adding components, adding variants of those components. So once you've got a section in here that you go, you know what, I'm happy with that layout. That's it. You're done. You can use that in lots of different pages. Now, just be careful with things like keeping the nav outside of the page slot, because you don't want maybe the client editing the nav all the time. They can, of course, edit the nav, and that will propagate across all the pages. The same with the footers. But when you come to making everything safe, everything happens in the page slot. But I'm not going to teach you about page building here. It was just a quick rundown on MAST 2.0. And I encourage you to go away and look at the explainers by Corey, because he goes into much more depth. But generally, I think this is a huge step forward in MAST, but it's a huge opportunity for us to all not necessarily learn about how MAST works, but just how components, component variants, component modes, all those things work. So go in, clone it, play around, break things, unattach components, just look at how things are working, and you'll learn a lot about all the new features in the Webflow ecosystem.